Good morning, trade professionals. Welcome to another episode of the Simply Trade podcast. Well, news roundup. Sorry, missed that part. I am in the studio again with Lalo. Hi, Lalo. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
It's a Friday for us, and it'll be a long weekend, meaning you will listen to this on the Monday when you're off for Labor Day.
Yay.
Woo! Go labor. That's what we're doing.
We're laboring.
We're laboring away.
We're laboring away.
For you guys. Yeah. Because we have some fun articles for you. So it's all, this labor is all for the good. Yeah, so hopefully you're enjoying your Labor Day, you're cooking out with your family, you're doing who knows what, taking a day to relax and listening to the Simply Trade podcast. So what a great day. Couldn't be better if you ask me. But let's get into it because we have some fun articles to talk about. Starting with, so this was an article by, I think the The supply chain dive, right? Dive? Yeah. Okay. And I really like the articles. They're not so political, I have to say. They're more, I don't know. I don't know. It seems that their articles are a little different than the ones we get from other sites. I don't know if you've noticed it. I think they're easier to read to me. I don't know. Anyways, so this article talks on the air cargo industry facing potential repercussions as the U.S. legislators consider lowering the de minimis exemption threshold for e-commerce goods from Asia, which could ultimately impact the industry's profitability. So the rise in e-commerce driven by companies like Shein and Temu, we have talked about those companies on the forced labor side. So I'm not sure how that ties into this, but anyways, let me go on. Has significantly increased air cargo demand. Wow, that's crazy, right? That it has increased while we see those kind of allegations. But increased air cargo demand, particularly for ultra-fast fashion items, which is what we're talking about. Despite the potential regulatory changes, the need for air cargo in meeting consumer demands remains crucial, presenting challenges for supply chain managers to kind of navigate the evolving landscape and adjust their strategies accordingly. So what do you think on this? And especially with lowering the de minimis, like what kind of effect does that have?
Well, obviously a big effect. And we've been talking about this so many times on both the news and the podcast. So we had Cindy Allen talking about it. We recorded an episode with Marianne Roughton, and she's coming. Her episode airs this week. So today, Monday. So later this week, we're going to have Marianne Roughton, and she's from the e-commerce group, who it's a nonprofit group. And she talked about the de minimis as well, how it affects e-commerce merchants, et cetera. So what do we need to look at here? What is going on? What is the issues or the effects of all this? One of the biggest problems, I guess, that we see is you lower the de minimis, and then what? Like a lot of true or American, let's call it American businesses that are small businesses, for example, vendors on Etsy or vendors on Amazon or you name it, right? On eBay and all that, just regular vendors, that have little shops at a market or, just little things like that, are used to importing items under that $800 threshold. And so lowering it, of course, is going to increase duties. It's going to increase taxes. Duties, and it's going to create more costs, obviously, ultimately to us, the consumer. So other efforts or other information other efforts that have been pitched or ideas, that's the best word. Other ideas that have been pitched are different things, like, for example, number one, lower the de minimis, right? Number two, what if you exclude countries like China and Russia from the de minimis? In other words, if any shipments originate from those countries, sorry, the de minimis is no longer $800. So that's another. Yeah. So they're excluded from that. And then the last one that I've heard, which is sort of what we've talked about on the show previously, and what Marianne Roughton as well is going to be talking on the episode, is to have more data collection reporting requirements. At this point, it's very minimal for de minimis. So the effort is get your broker involved a lot more by you giving the broker more data and more information regarding the shipment, where it is easier to understand or recognize if, number one, there's forced labor or there's anti-dumping. There's like if they're violating any quota requirements. For example, is it really under $800, or are they just saying it's under $800? Like, is evaluation correct? And then what are the other things? For example, the biggest concern is there like illicit drugs in that shipment? For example, fentanyl. That's the biggest one that has been talked about a lot by the U.S. Postal Service and by CBP. That the handling packages that are carrying fentanyl. So those are all the different efforts, of course, that may help. But of course, air cargo shipments, like you said, that's what the story was about to begin with, right? Annik, is that what we started with? Is the air cargo? And of course, they're increasing because there's a lot more shipments. There's a lot more of us that are buying dresses or knockoff suits or whatever anything. I mean, everybody's been on, or a lot of people have been on Temu or Shein or all these other sites where they're basically just very inexpensive. And so, of course, people are ordering it like crazy. And so that increases that increases the volume. So,
yeah. And I think also we're talking on the business kind of things, but as a consumer, if you're listening and you're not really in the trade world, or maybe we're all consumers in a way. I mean, we are. We have to. This is interesting to us too, because ultimately, if you shop on Shein or Temu, you're going to end up paying a little more if this is happening. So this is not just valuable to us in the industry, but also if you're a consumer and this is happening, you're probably the costs end up on your side, not on the seller side.
Right. Yeah. And I guess the biggest I understand the biggest takeaway here is really just for those of us that are in trade and that are involved in trade compliance. It's very likely very few of any, there's not many of you out there that are doing like the Temus and the Sheins out there. You know what I mean? You're doing more like the big stuff, like the Wayfairs out there, or the GEs, the big companies, that are importing what you're importing. And maybe on occasion, if you do have anything that is de minimis, pretty much the takeaway here, if you are in trade and if you are doing something that does come in under the $800 de minimis, then I guess the takeaway is more like be prepared. Be prepared to provide more data, more information, and work closer with your broker in order for that shipment to come in. Although if you listen to the episode that we had with Cindy Allen, she says the average shipment still is under $60 that comes in under de minimis. So I mean, so what's the big deal? So I mean, again, listen to that episode. There's a lot of information there, and also listen to Marianne Roughton's later this week. I think hers has a lot of great information as well.
All right, thanks. Moving on to the next one, we have Ooh, this is a good one, actually. This one kind of stuck me. Mexico suspends its relationship with the US and Canadian embassies over criticism of a proposed judicial reform. So the reform is aiming to elect judges through popular vote, sparking debates on democracy and the justice system's integrity. So US and Canadian ambassadors expressed concerns about the reform, leading to heightened tensions with Mexico. President Lopez Obrador emphasizes respect for Mexico's that's a bad word for me. Sovereignty.
Sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Amidst the diplomatic fallout, underscoring the need for open dialogue and mutual understanding. That's really important. I think mutual understanding between certain countries, which obviously this is a whole different topic. You guys know I love talking cultural differences and all that stuff. But what does this mean for the trade world? I mean, does it have a huge impact on it? And where do you see this going? Because this seems, I mean, that's not great. I don't know.
Okay, so Obrador, he did the same thing for Canada. He put a pause on them because Canada criticized them the same way. So I don't think you said that, but it's interesting to note that two countries, their two neighbors, for Mexico, are the ones that are criticizing this move of judicial reform.
But this is saying the reform. Okay, I have a question. This might be there's no stupid questions, but this I don't know if it is. So the reform aims to elect judges through popular vote. Popular vote meaning people are voting for the judges, right?
Right.
Why is this not good?
Well, I mean, because there may be corruption or some sketchy way of electing officials, you know what I mean? Or in this case, judges. So, I mean, there's different points of view. And of course, I don't see it that way in the sense that that's what's happening or that could happen, etc. I mean, the way I'm looking at it right now is that, okay, so we criticize them. He retaliated, right? And then he put a pause in any relations that we have. So now what, right? So
yeah, what does that mean? Your original, for trade?
Yeah, exactly. So now your question is, what does that mean to trade? Initially, if you look at it, and I read the article over and over only because I wanted to make sure I understood this correctly, and of course I did some more research on the side, and I saw that this doesn't necessarily mean any effect on trade in the sense that he didn't directly come out and say, oh, we're going to stop doing trade, like we're going to impose more tariffs or we're going to do more duties or we're going to put a pause on USMCA, for example, right? He didn't say any of that, thank goodness. But the implication is there, though. If you stop relations with the U.S. or with Canada in this case, also, so what's a problem? What are the potential problems that could happen, right? I mean, now maybe documents or information that needs to be processed for trade purposes through the embassy may no longer be available or may be dramatically delayed if that was the case. You know what I mean? Or who knows, maybe it could also mean that any new changes or any new disputes between USMCA could be also just like get dragged into this, like saying, well, remember that thing that you did for me back then? Now I'm going to kind of just blow you off on this request, or, so it can spill over. Let me just say that it can spill over into trade, although the embassy is not directly tied to trade, although there could be, but it's not directly. But it could spill over to trade, and that's where we need to worry. That's where we need to say, okay, whoa, we're not there yet, thank goodness. And I think it's just more of a threat. It's kind of like saying, come on, guys. How come you're getting? That's what you meant by sovereignty. Is like, how can you guys get involved in my business here in Mexico? In that way, in that sense of the word, you know what I mean, and not necessarily, in tariffs and all that, but more in that sense. So
Okay, well, that's good to know, guys. So we know now that's what's going on, and that's what they're fighting for, fighting against or what they're doing. But in the trade world, we don't have to worry just yet. So, you can breathe out and you're totally fine and just go on with your job. But your next one, no, maybe you're not affected, but maybe you are. So keep listening. We have, and this is a good one. I think they're actually following after the United States, because I think that the United States has already done this, right? But let me go into it, and then you can tell me if I'm totally wrong or right. So Canada has recently announced the imposition of 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, which this is where it stuck out to me, including Tesla models. Wow. What kind of effect will this have? So, along with a 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum from China. So, we're really going after China, just making sure, with the forced labor and whatever is going on in that country, we're taking care of. So, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, cited the need to address China's state-directed policy of overcapacity as as they're increasing these tariffs. So that was kind of the motive for it. And yeah, so I think it is aligning with the United States, it says, and the European Union. So Canada is kind of following suit. But wow, I didn't know Tesla models are affected.
Yes. So let me tell you why. First of all, you're right. This is exactly shadowing what the US did, like raising tariffs on Chinese EVs. And of course, the aluminum and steel imports that we add extra tariffs to. So to answer that question, yes, they're following in our footsteps. In other words, and not that it's bad, but they're in solidarity with the U.S. or whatever. So anyway, but yeah, exactly. So they're doing it. Also, obviously, the very obvious is to protect the Canadian market for EVs, and not market, but anybody in the business in Canada, any Canadian EV manufacturers or efforts in making EVs and all that. Now, Tesla, it is an American company, but ironically, most of the imports of Teslas coming into Canada are from China. Those are the ones that are made I think they're made in Shanghai or something. Let me try to remember where it was, but they're made in, Shanghai. They're made in Shanghai. And so that means they're made in China. So the effort, I guess, is to emphasize is not just Chinese companies, but it's also anything made in China coming into Canada. So that's what's going on with that. They're doing it basically the same reasons that we are. I think last week or 2 weeks ago we had a story that the EU did the same thing. The EU put tariffs on. They put tariffs on high tariffs, let's call it, on Chinese EVs, because for the same reasons that the US saying that those are subsidized by the Chinese government, meaning it's very unfair. If it costs me $1,000 to make a car, that'd be funny. But let's say it costs me $1,000 to make a car, the Chinese government might be giving me $500. You know what I mean? So I can go sell it for $1,000. You know what I mean? Instead of $2,000 or whatever the markup might be. And so that's very unfair. I get to sell it for whatever it costs me to make it, or a little more, because the Chinese government is giving me money to subsidize my manufacturing costs. And so that is a very well-known fact that's been happening especially with EVs. It happens in other industries, of course, but that is one of the other that's one of the main factors on that. And so yeah, I mean those are the implications. I mean, other things that can get dragged into there, and I believe they already are. But like, for example, Chinese batteries, any semiconductors and solar panels, etc. So all of that gets dragged into this. If it's not there, I think they're reviewing it to add it, or it's already there. So again, if you're in trade, what does this mean for you? What is your takeaway from this? And if you're importing into Canada any of these items, well, number one, you're going to have to start paying more duties and maybe figure out a way to bring them in. Well, you can't bring them in differently, but just figure out where to source differently. Source from other countries versus China. Secondly, is to keep an eye on what is going on with that. Only because, again, I believe they haven't added that, but I believe they are adding, like I said, batteries, semiconductors, and solar panels. So keep an eye, because if that comes in, something like solar panels is very abundant, and they're mostly all from China that are being manufactured. So, again, what does that mean? Is it higher? It's obviously going to be higher tariffs, but what do you do now? Do you now need to source from, say, India, or other countries?
Yeah. And actually, so I guess this is my fun fact of the day. I didn't bring this in, but Tesla actually asked Canada for lower tariffs on China-made EVs. Did you know this?
Wow. No. I didn't see that on the
Reuters.
article.
So this is from Reuters.
Uh-huh.
This is, and a government source says. So I guess it is seems to be official. But I honestly don't think, that's just a personal opinion. I don't know. That doesn't even make sense. But to me, I'm like, if you're doing it in China and, you're trying to import, it's the same thing. Like, you don't know what's going on there in China. That's the whole, then they're doing it. So I think it's also to keep American companies responsible.
Exactly. So I think they may need to prove without a shadow of a doubt and have 100% proof that that car is not subsidized. I seriously doubt the Chinese government is giving an American company, any subsidies. So number one, but you never know, right? So who knows? Maybe they are giving the manufacturer. Well, I don't know. Sorry, I really don't know what may be going on there. So let's say they're not, and you would hope and pray that Tesla's not using, for example, forced labor out in China. Let's just assume they're not.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a big point. How do you? And it's hard to prove. And then,
but I'm just saying, I think they may need to prove without just 100% certainty, prove that none of these other factors that are affecting this decision are present, so that maybe the Canadian government might say, okay, then we're not going to do 100% tariffs. Let's go back down to the normal tariffs. So who knows?
But it's interesting. See. So I guess we've been covering. Sorry, I'm moving around. We've been covering this story for a few weeks now. We've had different stories each week, though. One, it was United States that set the tariffs. Then it was Europe that set the tariffs. Now it's Canada. So who's following suit after this? I feel like we're done now. But we'll see. We'll keep you in check with that. At least now interesting stuff, and we will obviously keep you updated with anything that is coming from here on out. And that really is it. I know you guys missed Andy. He will be back probably next week. He's still moving and stuff, so things get pretty hectic if you've ever moved before. But we're here, and we're not going to let you down. So hopefully this one you like these articles, and if you have any questions, you can send them to us over. And I want to remind you that we do have a forced labor course coming up. I think it's October 8th, right? Am I wrong?
Yes.
October 8th. Yes. October 8th. So Global Training Center is having a forced labor course October 8th. You can still sign up. You can still sign up until the day before or the day off even. We just want to send this extension out to you just because we do feel like it is a course that will truly benefit you or your entire team. And if you have any questions regarding that, we can get you connected with one of the instructors just to talk about your benefits from this course. And and that's really it. So we hope that you have a great Labor Day and great week ahead. And we will see you next Monday. Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.